Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bradley Shaw. Today we have an exceptional guest, Lesley Hanson, author of the book Gary, which is a story of survival. And he's joined us today to tell us his inspirations and aspirations and writing experiences, and of course more about that book. Hello Gary, thank you for joining us. Hello Lesley, sorry, thank you for joining us. Gary is the name of the book, sorry.
No worries, Brad. How you going?
Good, mate. Good. So tell us about Gary, the book, as a summary.
All right. So Gary's a mate of mine. I've known him for about 25 years. We met a few years ago, just like through a work thing. And as we got to know each other, we became really good mates and do a lot of camping and stuff like that together. And then as we were spending time together, he started to open up to me about things that had happened to him during his past. And it wasn't great, but we had a good chat. And as we were talking, he was seeing a psychologist. The psychologist mentioned to him about writing stuff down would help him release it. Because there are times when he really struggles with it. So one day while we're out camping, we're having a chat, and the night progressed, and we just ended up talking a lot more about it. And he said, "Oh, what do you reckon? Do you want to help me?" Because he tried writing it, but it was too hard to write about himself.
Yeah.
So I thought it might be easier if he just told me some stories and I wrote them down for him.
Yeah.
And then over time, we're just spending a bit of time with other mates. And one day Gary was a bit flat and he was telling me a couple of things that happened. And one of our other mates, Steve-O, he was just sitting there listening, and he kept pretty quiet. And at the end of it, he said that he'd actually been suffering some similar things. And so he said to Gary that he didn't actually realize that Gary suffered from anything either. And then knowing that Gary did actually made him feel better in himself because he didn't feel so alone.
Yeah.
And then we just thought, well, instead of just writing all of this down, why don't we put it all together in a book? And then if someone else reads it and they felt the same way, they felt that they weren't so alone and isolated, that it might help them as well. So that's what we did.
So there were a lot of, obviously, a lot of personal expressions and issues in the book that relate to younger men who have to deal or haven't been able to deal with, I guess, as you say, a lot of those issues alone. So through this book, you're hoping to tell Gary's story and those stories, but also help other men understand that there's not that loneliness associated to some of those experiences. Yeah,
well, like blokes generally don't open up as much as we should. We kind of keep everything bottled up inside and try and keep it to yourself, and you end up getting yourself in a worse position. So we just thought that if other people knew that Gary had been through stuff and he was still pushing ahead and he wasn't giving up or turning to things that could be more detrimental to him, it might give them something to do as well. They might say, all right, well, if this bloke can keep going, so can I.
Yeah.
And even if it just opens up people to have a conversation with their mates the same way that Gary and I did, hopefully that'll help someone.
So, I mean, obviously you and Gary got very close through the process because you've obviously expressed, I've read a lot of it personally that Gary's shared with you. Was it difficult to write on that sort of process when you're writing someone else's intimate story like that?
Yeah, very difficult because I've read back through it a few times going through the process, and if you sort of block out that it's your mate, you read it and you think, geez, that wasn't all that flash. You went through a lot of stuff. But when you look at it and it is your mate, it is someone that you're close to, and you read it, that hits you a lot harder. And I know there are times now when Gary still really struggles, and knowing the things that have happened to him, it is hard. And trying to put them all down on paper, it wasn't an easy process for either of us. And there were a lot of tears shed, and even reading back through it, there are parts of it that both of us where we've had to go back through it and reread it and look at it. It was really difficult, and we both ended up in a bit of a mess at times.
Yeah. Was it cathartic? Was it a healing? Was it a closure? I mean, what was the realm of, what did you feel Gary got out of that experience with you? Like you helping him to shed that story that he passed in his life?
Well, now when he is having those darker times, he does feel more open to giving me a call, picking up the phone and saying, "Hey mate, I'm not real flash today," and we'll just have a talk. So it's certainly helped both of us, build a stronger friendship, and something that'll last forever. But I think that there are times when he still finds it really hard, but just knowing that other people know that about him now, particularly his good mates, he doesn't feel as isolated, and he can just pick up the phone and ring me, or ring one of our other really good mates who we've talked to a bit, like Steve. Him and Gary have hooked up pretty close as well now, and the ability to be able to contact that other person and not feel guilty, not feel like you're invading on their time or their privacy or being a nuisance to them, it does help.
Yeah. And when you started the process with Gary, obviously there possibly, I mean, I could imagine the emotional content would have been quite overwhelming. So was there a linear story? Was there an actual structure you tried to keep to try to plan the book out with him, to try to scale it into that story? I mean, to make sure you had something that was readable, or was it more or less a start just to scribe everything down and try to piece it together later, but just get that emotional content out of the way?
Yeah, look, I've never written anything in my life. Like, since high school, I haven't written anything. And so this was the first time I had a crack at writing anything. And initially, it was just a bunch of stories. Like, we'd sit down wherever, at home, out in the bush, wherever, and just talk. And I'd write a couple of things down, and Gary would write a couple of things down. And then we just started to put it all together. And we thought we'd try and run it in some sort of chronological order. So it had some level of flow about it, and actually, as you go through it, it kind of does bounce back and forward a bit for relevance to whichever sort of topic we're on. But it does have some sort of chronological order to it.
Yeah. So how long did it take, do you feel, to do that process? Like the writing of the book, the putting together of the book, the sharing time? I mean, obviously you became very close, but I'm assuming there was some period of, there's quite a long period of time working together as well.
Yeah, to be honest, it took us 2 to 3 years to actually get something down to when we sent it to you. And we're both extremely grateful that you picked it up and said it was worth putting out there. But it took us probably 2 or 3 years of just, like, because of the content, it wasn't easy just to sit down and say, all right, well, this weekend, let's get into it. It had to be when, Gary in particular was in the right frame of mind to be able to recall some of those things and talk openly about them. Yeah,
and that's the challenge, is getting in the place where you're safe and in your own mind, ready to share that sort of personal information, experiences. Even no matter how close you are to someone, you still have a challenge. Opening up must be very hard for Gary. Very brave of him. So if I can, on that note, then what would you say for you as the author of Interpreter, taking this story on? What was the hardest part for you to write? Do you feel, is there a key part in the book that really stands out for you, that you had to really write that and to share that with Gary?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that happened to him as a kid, I just can't imagine it. Like, I've got my own kids and they mean the world to me. Same with Gary, he's got his own kids. And like, neither of us could ever imagine doing those kinds of things to our children. Like, the love that we have for our children and the commitment we have to them, and the just innate desire to protect them and care for them. And Gary never really got that. And just to see that, and like, Gary's not alone. There's so many other kids out there who are now adults who have been treated like that, and sadly, I guess, are still being treated like that. Yeah. But it's just something we can't get our head around, how someone treated their own kid that way. Yeah. That's the hardest thing, really. There's a lot of that illogic, or the perceptions of things in life that you wonder about people and how those happen to other people. Like, in your placement, sometimes you can't see it, understand it. But having that knowledge, and obviously Gary having that
ability to now share it and gain his learning and closure, I guess. Did you share this with others, with family, with friends, other people close to you? Did they help the writing of the book? Was it a part of that process as well, or was it a very private thing that you boxed the information away for until it was ready to share? You were more comfortable with it? Like, what was your process for that?
No, I spoke to my wife a lot about things that Gary was telling me, because a lot of what he said and what we wrote is difficult to take on board, particularly when it's someone you're that close to. And I know with Gary's wife, she read an earlier copy. Like, he has told her quite a few things that have happened during his life, and she's fully aware of his past, and tries to help him as best she can. But she can't read it. Like, she did read an earlier version, and it just upset and angered her so much that she struggles with it now. She thinks it's a great concept, and she's really happy that we've gone to the effort and time to put it all down. And like us, she hopes that someone can read it and give them a bit of a kick on as well. Yeah. But it's something that she finds extreme difficulty in, like, looking at. And the same with my wife. She's not comfortable reading it because of, the love and affection she has for Gary. It's a difficult topic to discuss.
Yeah, it's such a personal vein when you know the author. I mean, when you're close to an author, of course, you're close to the subject matter, and as you say, if you become good friends, of course, everyone's going to be protective or interpretive and sensitive to it. And that's something, though, that is well presented in the book. It's very well written, the way you've put Gary's story together to make sure that a reader, although experiencing that and understanding that, doesn't have the judgment or doesn't have the bitterness. You didn't make anybody intentionally evil in the book. I mean, bad things happened, but they were people still. Like, the people that was happening, as much as it happening to Gary, was still not just, you tried to balance the situation, which was, I think, effective in the narrative. And having said that, you haven't written before. It's surprising that you created such a great structured story. And I hope, are you intending to write more again? Are you intending to write other stories?
Yeah, I am actually. I thank you for those kind words, but after having spent so much time trying to put this together and structure sentences that, made sense and didn't contradict or overrun each other, I kind of started writing other things. And there are other things that I'm just working on, like nothing like this, just more non-fiction, just a bit of fun to write down, just a book that hopefully one day will find its way into a shop as well. Yeah.
No, that's good. You should, one of the issues too, one of the elements too that, you could devolve to, and it's entirely up to you, don't just put it out there, but some of the softer issues or the issues for children protection wise could be put into a children's book or a series that could help parents understand, those effects as well and other things. So there's a lot of concepts in that book that you've created, but also shared. And I think any other things you write, the way you write, I think we'll have a very strong, reserved narrative that people will enjoy. Having said that, so what would you say is your most interesting writing quirk? Everybody has a habit, style when they write. What would you say that you do that is most interesting or different?
I think the thing that'd be most different is, as quite a few of my friends say, like, I grew up in the country the same as Gary, and we speak quite country. Like, a few of our friends sort of joke us a bit about the way we speak and the language and the slang and the kind of stuff we use. And I think that was quite prevalent in the book. Like, I think if you read it, it doesn't sound like it's come from someone that's, brought up, well-educated, like we're both educated, but, not, watching all our airs and graces. It's, I wrote the way I speak.
Yeah. And that's good. That's that's authenticity too. The effect of the story, the way Gary's obviously shared it with you and the way you've interpreted it and put the styles together is very good. So when did you first realize you wanted to write this story? Like you said, you were out camping and talking, but when did you realize, not so much, I understand you were writing the story that Gary was sharing to help him perhaps vent or heal that baggage he had to carry. But when did you decide you wanted to make it into that book, into that story, and become something?
There was one particular thing that Gary related to me, he was working one day. This is like just prior to when we started writing it. And like we've been talking about a little bit and toying with the idea of writing it, but he was telling me he was working one day and he was fixing up some timber works near a playground, a local playground. And he was having a particularly bad day. He wasn't feeling too good. And he was actually contemplating some of his darker thoughts and if he was to end his life, how he would do it. And it was sort of mid-morning, and this lady and a young child came in to go to the nearby playground. And he stopped working just to let them pass and not be too noisy as walking through, but he's actually using a drop saw. And he had contemplated just putting his wrist under the saw the next time he dropped it.
Yeah.
But this lady walked through and didn't know her, she didn't know him, but she just smiled at him and said hello. And he acknowledged her and said, "Oh, hi, how are you going?" And then she said, "Oh, what a lovely day," and kept walking. And just the fact that that lady took the time to acknowledge him and smile at him completely changed his attitude that day. He forgot about the dark thoughts he was having and thought, you know, life is worth living. So he didn't do anything stupid. And when he told me that story, I said, "Mate, we really got to do something about this, because something as simple as being acknowledged and greeted with a smile or a simple hug, that can really change your day. And sometimes, you know, you feel really lonely and abandoned or just lost. And for someone to say hello to you, and for someone to just, a mate, whoever, to give you a hug or put their hand on your shoulder can change you from doing something devastating to, you know, getting through and having not a bad day. So that's why we did it.
That's awesome. That's good. So tell me, how did, I mean, obviously it would have been a hard year for Gary as well with the isolation of lockdown. You know, did he manage to work through the process, like keep working? Was there, what was the situation for you and Gary through the lockdown? Like, obviously it would have been very hard for not having that interaction with people or that kindness seen as often, and just sitting alone.
Yeah, it's been like, isolation is the exact word. It has been very isolating, and you know, we've both been able to work on and off, like we're both in trades, so the work site has completely changed, and instead of having a whole group of guys around you who you can laugh and joke around with, you've had a much reduced number, you've had to be much more careful, and there has been, you know, a couple of weeks on end where you've been at home and not been able to get out and see your mates or see your family, your friends, your loved ones, and spend that time with them. And so it has made it a lot harder, and it has really hit both of us. There's been more phone calls, I guess, just as a way to keep in touch with each other and check how you're going. But the actual physical contact, that miss of a handshake, the miss of a hug when you greet someone, you know, I don't know if it's just us because of where we grew up and the way we grew up, but a handshake from a mate or a hug for your closest mates, that's really important. And not being able to do that at the moment is quite isolating and makes it worse. Yeah,
it's a very strange social dynamic. I'm like you, I grew up with that whole expressive connection to people, you know, the kinesthetic handshakes, the hugs, the nods, you know, the close proximity of sitting around people you really enjoy company of. So yeah, it has been a very hard year. And of course that makes you think of, in that situation, makes you think of people like Gary who are going through challenges already at that level, but yeah, finding themselves uncontrollably, unselectively, again, in a situation. So yeah, I'm glad that you know, you were there for him and you got through it together, because hopefully New Year is coming up. 2021 is going to be much better for everybody. Yeah, that's the goal. So tell me, what, just out of curiosity, just what did you want to do yourself, Lesley, when you grew up as a kid? What were your aspirations?
Actually, I always wanted to. I actually wanted to be a chippy, which fortunately I am. Gary wanted to be a cop. He always had a dream of being a cop. I think it was, you know, so he could protect people and all that kind of thing. But due to his diabetes, he was unable to join the force. So that was a little bit of a setback and a disappointment to him. But as with everything else, he's just taken it on and moved on and found something else to do.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you really admire Gary. Like you find him quite inspirational in the way that he has had to deal with so much, but still kept his head and kept himself focused and growing and not so much accepting, but learning the lessons of it, and just knowing that, understanding that it's not all his fault. There's not a victimization in it all. It's all about the situation happening and dealing and growing to it, from it. So I like that. I like that you've respected that story in the book.
Yeah.
I think the readers will enjoy that as well. I think that's where, it'll be a journey. It was for me, an emotional journey. So I think the readers will find your style engaging and the story engaging as well, and the experiences of that are learning, I hope, for understanding more of that male condition and why and how that can happen sometimes without you even being aware of it, people being aware of it. So on a thought too, having published your first book, what do you see now as literary success? How do you define a literary success in the definition to you, to your idea of success?
I don't know. I don't think it has to be like a 1 million copy seller or anything like that. I think for the one that Gary and I put together here, success would be if just one person picked it up and read it, and it gave them some sort of hope. It just made them feel that they were doing okay as well, and they didn't have to take to those darkest corners. They could reach out to one of their mates and have a chat, or give one of their mates a hug. I think one of the things that needs to change a little bit in the Australian psyche is that it's all right to hug your mate. Yeah. It's all right to give him a call and say, I feel like crap today. What do I do?
Yep, absolutely. No, it is. It's very important that men and women and gender basis of understanding definitions need to change a little, and we understand that men have a need for that closeness as much as we had in the past had personas of our fathers and grandfathers and such who were stronger, less communicative, less touchy-feely, less growing. There wasn't that real intimacies, I think. I'd say I saw it in my family. But again, I think if men can evolve for their children in the future to show it's okay to have a little vulnerability, have a little bit of, because it's not weak. I think it's strong if a man's vulnerable, if a person, can be honestly emotional, in a context that defines the point. And you've done that really well in the book. And I think I do believe strongly that readers will experience that with you. Of course, being the publisher of the book, I'd also like to see 1 million copies sold. So that's just my shallow side.
We wouldn't say no to that either, but it's not what we're expecting.
But no, it's really good. So do you have any books you've drafted or started, or any future plans for the next phase? Have you started any ideas, or are you sort of just sitting on letting this one evolve first and see how it goes?
No, the last 6 months I've been just toying away with the book I was mentioning earlier, but we'll see how that goes, whether or not it's worth someone else reading. It's a bit of fun for me to write. Hopefully someone will, I'll send it to yourself, and if you find it interesting enough, maybe we can do something with that one as well.
Yeah, great, good. Now, also, do you find, having now written a book, and have you been able to meet or network or connect to other writers as well through the process as you're learning the craft of being an author? And have you learnt anything from them? If you have, have you developed friendships with other authors just to get peer support, or have you just mostly done this experience on writing on your own?
Yeah, most of it has been done on my own, but I do have another friend who's an author. She's actually someone in your stable, I guess you call it. Yeah. And her and I have spoken a little bit about our books and going through the publishing process, and just sharing ideas, and all of that has really helped, being able to talk to someone else who is going through the same process at pretty much the same time. Right. That has definitely been an advantage. Obviously all of this is completely new to me. It has been good to be able to just pick up the phone and give her a call and say, how's yours going? What are you doing with this? And how did you do that? Yeah. So that's been a great help.
Yeah, good. And it's important, I think, to have peer support in any venture that you're taking on, especially if this is your first time as writing this type of book or this style of full novel. So just with that too, you wrote a mix, of course, from characters in the book, or what would you find was, what was the hardest part about, I guess, creating the characters of the opposite sex for you, not having learned the art of writing totally? How did you define women in the story as much as, you understood Gary because he was a guy and a mate, and you sort of got that firsthand, but the reaction to and the introduction of the women, did you find writing them harder? I mean, some male authors or some female authors find it hard to write men. So did you find any challenges in the opposite sex sort of?
Well, for this, I didn't really get into their psyche or try to get into their psyche. I just basically wrote it from the experience that Gary had. So there are a couple of different female characters who have been spoken about in the book, but I didn't go a lot into what they were thinking or why they did what they did. That was more just how it affected Gary and what lasting effect that had on Gary, like what happened to him at the time, and then how that's sort of focused on what it's done to him now.
Yeah, good.
So I think I'm like most guys, and I don't really understand how ladies think, and they probably don't understand how we think that it's a good thing. It's good to have a little bit of mystery, but sometimes whether you're a guy having an effect on a lady or a lady having an effect on a guy, sometimes I think you do need to be a little bit more aware of the lasting impression you can have.
Yeah. No, that's good. So what would you say if, having now gone through the author induction of writing the first book, what would you say would be your writing kryptonite? What stops you in your tracks when you're trying to write or trying to get that momentum going?
Yeah, it's funny. Some days you could sit there and throw out, a couple of thousand words without any problem. And other days you just sit there and look at it and think, well, how do I make that make sense? And sometimes just the simple wording of like a paragraph, you can be blocked on it for hours. And so I just get up and go outside and play with my dog or go and do something like that and come back and have a go at it later. And then all of a sudden it'll just flow. Yeah.
So it's just that time or mindset of just getting yourself relaxed and focused. I mean, particularly when you're dealing with some of the subject matter being so heavy sometimes in the pieces of the story that Gary shared, and you have to try to filter it into being able to share it to a reader with some small portion of objectivity that still keeps it real, but keeps it not dragging you down, I guess, as well. So you come out of it totally exhausted.
Well, yeah, there were days when you got up from the computer and walked away, and I wouldn't have written much. Just reading through the notes that I took while Gary was talking to me and thinking back on the conversation we had and looking at the emotion on his face. And quite often he was, quite distraught, and he'd sort of speak for a couple of minutes and he'd just go dead quiet. And, initially you sort of, oh, you're right, mate. But then I kind of got to know by talking to him not to push at those times, just to let him sit and get it right in his mind and breathe through it. There were times, some of the stuff that's in there, like really affected me writing it and hearing it from Gary, but it affected him terribly, having to think back on it and recall those things and actually say it out loud. For him, sometimes saying those things out loud caused him great distress, and seeing that in your mate wasn't easy. And then when I was writing it, I'd look back on the emotions that he went through, and they came through to me, and I'd get up from the computer really angry or really sad and just have to walk away and find my own little quiet space to process it and think, how would I feel if that actually happened to me? Yeah. And it was bloody hard.
Of course, especially being such a close friend to Gary. So also the just curiously, have you through the process as well, have you investigated the male support networks out there for for you and Gary, or for the group of Steve, as we said, you mentioned? So you looked at like Beyond Blue, they do a lot of that for that depression side or that impact side, the Man Shed. I know they've got a few locations set up. Have you found those groups also have an impact or a benefit to I think, the male need for support?
Yeah, definitely. Like Beyond Blue and Black Dog Institute, I think both of those are awesome organisations, and Movember's another really big one.
Yeah.
The support that they put behind men's health. The local men's shed, yeah, definitely. I've met a couple of guys who go there regularly, and just that being able to go and hang around with a couple of blokes. Generally, you may not know anyone when you first go there, but meet a few people and they become familiar faces, and then having that something to go and do. Like for guys who have retired, Men's Shed it seems like an awesome program. They're no longer just sitting at home on their own when they've been so active throughout their lives. They can now go back there and still have a purpose and do things that help out, which is a great thing.
Good. No.
Another group that I've got in touch with, and Gary's a member of as well, like we both bought a Harley, and something that we've never had before, but decided why not. And it's kind of like our release on, a day when you're feeling ordinary, just go for a ride and just on the bike for, half an hour or so and clear your head out. And in Melbourne, there's a couple of Harley Davidson, Harley Heaven stores. And they have a group, the Harley Owners Group, and, they're associated with each store you buy from, but they're Australia-wide, they're worldwide. And meeting a few people from those groups and talking to them, they have organised rides, which has been really difficult throughout the coronavirus lockdown. No one's been able to ride in groups, but that's opening up again now. And, just being able to go for a ride with a group of mates, you might have no other interest that's similar other than you ride a motorbike, and just go on a ride together, and then at the end you stop and have a coffee, something to eat somewhere, and ride back home. But just being able to go out in a group like that and talk to people about anything, it's a big help, just little groups like that.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to have a chuckle. I had this vision of the Wild Hogs movie with John Travolta and Tim Allen, and I just had you guys, see you with bandanas and cruise along. Sorry, that's good. It is a good group. I agree. It is good to find productive, still masculine things, but also connecting to guys that help you, understand that we spend so much time with our wives and our families and our children that we can sometimes exhaust our need of masculinity, or our need of feeling manly. I said, in a way to bond in a different level, in a different way. I agree. Those groups and all you mentioned are great. And COVID has been hard, of course, for everybody involved in it. But hopefully, like I keep saying, 2021 has got to get better.
Well, I hope it doesn't get any worse, that's for sure.
Oh, God, I hope not too. Gosh. So anyway, Gary, look, Lesley again. Gary is the book titled by Lesley Hanson. I do thank you for your time. That was wonderful, for sharing and for letting us into thoughts and the emotional contents of the book. For everybody listening out there, the book is available everywhere that you can grab books. So please just drop into your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they can order it, or online as well at most of your bookstores. The book is called Gary. It's called A Survival Story, and Lesley Hanson, who's taken the time to construct that story through the narration of his friend. So he's done a wonderful job. So please go and purchase that and support a new Australian author, and also support male bonding and male needs for support. So thank you again for listening. Take care. Thank you, Lesley. We'll talk to you very again soon, I'm sure, for another book in the future.
Thanks for your time, Brad.
Now.